This is Fam Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air with Dr. Cindi Saj. And you're a top therapist to use EDMR, CBT, hypnotherapy, and yoga for trauma recovery. Welcome to the Fam Electric Ghost podcast. How you doing this Saturday afternoon?
Hi, Phantom. I am doing excellent. Thank you very much for having me.
Well, we love to talk to people on the show. We've been talking to people since 2016. This is actually episode 1190.
Wow.
And what we like to also do before we get to the heart of your story is we ask a couple questions of every guest. Why do you do what you do, and what motivates you?
Yeah, those are great questions. So I do what I do because I absolutely love working with people. I love working with people to find, that smile that comes to their face when they recognize that, hey, I'm actually worthy. Hey, I'm good enough. And hey, I matter. That to me is so just rewarding in the sense of making the world a better place. And this idea that I do it because I've had, people throughout my life to make me feel that way. And I know that that's something that we all deserve and that it just feels good. When the world feels good, it's just a better place to live. And so this is my small part to making the world a better place.
Well, you're paying it forward. I love to talk to people who are, teachers or mentors or therapists because, it's really, I think it's important to kind of share your experiences with other people. That's why I like oral histories. That's why I like podcasting, because it allows you to have a master class in humanity. Every time you talk to a guest, you learn things that you never knew about, and it's like listening and
Yeah.
exchanging ideas in this kind of form. I think is I think a lot of people like it. This seems to be an area of media that's growing.
Yeah.
But in terms of a couple of things I wanted to ask you, like what is EMDR for those who don't know? Because we're going to talk about it today, so maybe kind of get
Yeah.
a baseline.
For sure. So EMDR is a really long name, so they make it EMDR. So it's eye movement, desensitization, and reprocessing. And even the word EMDR and kind of the longer definition of it is a little bit misleading. And so what EMDR is, it is eye movement, and it does kind of activate the left and the right brain hemisphere to kind of help us process big emotions. However, it's not just eye movement. There's things like tapping that you may have heard about, or even this audio kind of sounds going left and right ear. So it's not just eye movement, but that's kind of what people have really taken and run with.
That's interesting because I play. I'm a musician, but I'm a sound designer.
Yeah, yeah,
So I play with oscillators
yeah.
that create sound waves, and I've always loved the kind of synergy between sound and like visualization.
Yeah, you're bringing
It's
up an excellent point when you're talking about you innately recognize the value of sound. And I think this kind of ties it back to like a little bit of this healing journey is that we have these amazing technologies and mechanisms and processes that help us heal. And so you're mentioning audio and music is very therapeutic. When you get the right music and you get the right kind of tone and pace and going back and forth, it can be very healing. It can also be very activating. So it's kind of like music has the capacity to kind of calm us down or get us really wrapped up and angry and mad, or
yeah,
it's
it
amazing
can
what
trigger.
it can do.
Yeah, it can trigger like a lot of things in terms of visualization. Like when you see things, like you're
Yeah,
talking about, like rapid eye movement and tapping, and that's the connection between like physical and sight and then sound and like the idea more ethereal like vibrations.
yeah,
Or
100%. Yeah,
and people get like, can you get in tune with this idea of frequencies that like calm,
yeah,
right? And
yeah.
frequencies that agitate.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're mentioning vibrations. And with EMDR, as I mentioned, like it's not just eye movement, but there's also little pulsers or tappers that kind of vibrate. And so they'll alternate left hand, right hand, left hand, right hand. And the faster you go, the more kind of, reprocessing, disturbing, or kind of big it gets. And the slower you go, the more calming it is. And so you're definitely touching on what music and vibrations can do for our bodies.
Yeah, I think it's just when you start to listen to yourself and then you listen to external information, it's like, so it's part of what you do, internal and external, and kind of bridging
Yeah.
the gap.
Yeah, I love that you're bringing that up. So this idea of like our mind can heal our body can heal our mind. And then when we start to bring in external factors to help us soothe, even this idea of like breath work, right? Sometimes with music, we kind of hold our breath, or we might breathe heavier, or we might breathe lighter. That all is connected, and that really does matter for our insides, right? For our calm, for our hyper arousal. That all matters, what we listen to around us and what we're doing to our bodies. So 100%.
And then you've also you use yoga, and then
Yeah.
you use hypnotherapy. So you've got a lot of tools that you're using, and you're crossing different areas.
Yeah.
Is it
Yeah.
is it all kind of combination of all those things, or you ease people into certain things, and or is like
Yeah.
it depends on who the individual is?
Great question. So definitely when you hear about all these different modalities to healing, you're like, well, what is this person doing? Like, this sounds like it's a little bit eclectic or reckless. Definitely slowing it down a little bit. It's not all at once. However, with that being said, is these are all tools that we could use to help heal. So yoga is, we move with yoga, and within yoga, there's always this idea of balance. And so when you're looking at the brain, when you find balance in our brain between the logical brain and the emotional brain, that's when we're doing our best, right? When we're able to kind of rationally move through life and not have our emotions trigger us to making bad decisions. So bringing it back to yoga, we look to balance the body, which in turn balances the mind. A lot of other things like, this idea of EMDR is bilateral simulation, which is balance. The other part about, hypnotherapy is people kind of have this misunderstanding that it's this thing that we talk and, people just, out of control do stuff. It's actually not. Hypnotherapy really is this idea of enticing people into like a calm, we use the word trance, but it really is just calm space that you're able to kind of actually logically and with calm emotions process different things. And so it really is this like going back or journey back to our authentic balanced self through different modalities. So whether it's yoga with movement, or whether it's through, positive psychology with talk therapy, or whether it's through, different ways of tapping, right? There's all these strategies that we can innately do to help us kind of soothe.
So a lot of these things are kind of like remapping behavior,
Yeah,
eh,
yeah.
because I'm in my day job, I'm an technologist, system analyst, and I'm a musician, so I kind of I'm in the arts. So
Yeah.
what I like to do is like a kind of combination of left and right brain,
Yeah, yeah. I
and
love.
and it seems like a lot of times people think like design in that area it's all logic. A lot of it's like art.
Yeah,
There's art and logic, and when you kind of synthesize the both sides, and you're open to like dream state, flow state, in the moment, not being perfect. Like musicians, we have this term, like this phrase is like there's not a bad note, there's an opportunity,
yeah,
right? So the modal jazz, infusion jazz, kind of embraces that, the idea that if you hit a different note than what was expected, we can actually work with that,
yeah.
and it doesn't wreck it. It's kind of like the happy accident.
Yeah, yeah. Phantom, you're bringing up awesome words, and I'm just like, you keep saying all like great things. So remapping, and that's 100% what EMDR and what a lot of even like counseling, like therapeutic modalities do. We remap neural pathways in the brain, and so as you're kind of saying, there's no bad note in the sense that hey, whatever comes up when we're doing this EMDR, whether it is a memory of a time that you felt not good enough, or whether it was a really great memory of feeling good enough, those are all interconnected and they all map to something. And so when you say remapping, you're absolutely right. This idea of there's no bad place that your mind takes you unless it causes you harm. And so when we're kind of reformatting or remapping our brain, is to kind of move away from the things that hurt us and move towards the things that help us. And that can be achieved, as you're mentioning, through kind of getting the right beat, or getting the right tone, or getting the right vibrations, or what's around. You're definitely, it's amazing when artists come together, whether it's through counseling or whether it's through music, to find healing and to find balance. It's pretty cool to hear.
Well, I always felt that, I would talk to a lot of therapists and people talk about art therapy. And I think like when you think about the arts, a lot of times I've talked to a lot of artists, over like 1,000. And it seems like the act of doing the art is very therapeutic. It's like you kind of run through, we find a way to synthesize what's inside, what's outside. And, this idea of the muse, you kind of call it, and we can channel the vulnerability
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
turn it into something beautiful, or put it out in the world. And by processing that, we kind of live through it and find a way to make something that could be negative or sad or painful, or it could be happy, it could be whatever. It's emotional,
Yeah.
and you turn it into something. And then because then you actually processed it, it's like a looking glass self. You didn't just try to shove it away. It's like, well,
Yeah.
suck it up. Don't think about it. You actually looked into it and figured out something to kind of understand, like, what did I just go through? Maybe there's a lesson learned. Is that part of like the reprogramming and remapping that you do with your
You're
practices,
on.
to have people do that analysis?
You are onto it. So this idea of, we don't want to stuff, and you think about this idea of like a metaphor to stuff. And whenever we stuff our feelings, it kind of goes into this big like cave. And if you think about a volcano, it comes from like, pressure being stuffed so long and we just blow up. And so with art and with counseling, this idea of like you get it out, you get it off your chest, you get it down on paper. Art is very therapeutic. People find that as like their coping strategies. Their self-care is through art, is through expressing their thoughts and feelings in a healthy, way that doesn't harm anyone, that doesn't, harm themselves, and it creates a beautiful masterpiece. And so when we move through a big feeling, so whether it's trauma, whether it's grief, whether it's pain, sadness, heartbreak, whatever that is, when you get it off of your inside, so when you get it, off your mind or off your chest, as we kind of use as a metaphor, and put it down to paper or put it down to words. That's why journaling is so important.
Mm,
Words really are just words. Like in the big picture of things, like we've created these words, and words are meaning to us. And so art is meaning to us. And so when you're getting things off your chest and writing them down, very therapeutic. And then you can kind of see beautiful artwork being created, whether it's through grief, whether it's through loss, whether it's through sadness, or whether it's through joy. Expression is definitely a human communication.
Also, like, if you think about like your voice, everybody's voice, the voice is an instrument, whether you can play a musician, an instrument or not.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, if you like voice memo,
Yeah.
like, even if you don't want to put it down on paper,
Yeah. Yeah.
listening back to yourself can be very illuminating.
Yeah.
Y-
Yeah.
And when people go to therapists and they talk, but sometimes, like, if you actually look at the words you're saying and the
Yeah.
phrases you're saying,
Yeah.
and then you can actually, if you don't actually listen to yourself, you probably don't listen to other people either, because you
I love
haven't
it.
figured out a way to understand, like, why are you in this frame?
Yeah.
Because you put yourself into this loop.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if you're always saying, I can't do this, or I'm
Yeah.
not the best at that, or I never, it's like, look at the phrases you use all the time, and then wonder, like, are you in a limited belief system, or
Yeah.
you're more growth mindset, or what?
Yeah.
You can kind of, it's kind of readily apparent.
Yeah, you're picking up on cognitive behavioral therapy, which talks about, looking at our thinking processes and what we tell ourselves and then how that plays out in our life. And you're absolutely right with this idea of what we tell ourselves, we then believe, and then we act as. Also, we talk about your voice. Voice is so therapeutic to say things out loud, whether we're, this empty chair therapy approach is when you kind of talk to someone who's not really there, right? Or saying your voice, using your words to say what you mean. Looking at even connecting this to yoga, right? Chanting, or this idea of like saying having vibrations in our throat actually is very therapeutic as well. So we're given so many tools to heal, and it's so great to talk about this because, yeah, like even saying words is therapeutic, even singing is therapeutic, even chanting is therapeutic.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a Buddhist at Nichiren Daishonin, and we do Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. We have that chant, among other
Yeah.
ones. And it just, every time you do it, it just, why, the world is full of noise.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm a child of the 70s. And I didn't have as much noise back then that I have today. Right.
Yeah.
And it's like there's so many things, from our wearables to all these inputs coming in. And then sometimes, as an artist, we kind of need a place, and I think all people need, it's not even artists, but this, you kind of got to get away from the noise. You got to quiet your mind.
Yeah.
Before I can even do anything, I have to kind of get to a space where I'm not getting overloaded.
Yeah.
Then I can kind of focus on what I want to paint, sound painting or whatever I want to
Yeah.
draft or create. And it's so difficult today with all these inputs, to, like, how do you reframe when there's like all these things trying to frame
Yeah.
your mindset?
Yeah. I love that you use the word noise. I often talk to clients about noise in your life. And noise can be, as you're saying, like all these extra overstimulation that we're getting, whether it's, social media, whether it's the news, whether it's just people in community or in the grocery store complaining about stuff, right? We call that noise because is it serving you? Is it helping you grow? Probably not, right? And so when you're able to kind of, even this metaphor of noise of finding the silence in your mind, that's where you're going to find what matters to you and who you are. And when we silence all the drama or all the noise around us that's not conducive to help us heal and grow, that's where we're going to get more powerful over our life.
And then the idea that the body can heal itself, because I think a lot of times, like in Western medicine, it's always like you watch TV, it's like always some pharmaceutical.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
always some magic pill.
yeah.
And science is good. I'm in tech, but it
Hmm.
seems like if everything's external,
Yeah.
then you're not doing any work.
Well, we forget that we are so powerful as we are, right? This idea that we get a cold, our body will produce what it needs to fight that cold. We've been told that, you need to go buy Tylenol, you need to go, not that I'm dissing any pharmaceutical name or company, but we're told that we have to go buy stuff and we have to go buy things to make us feel better. We forget that, hey, you know what? Just with rest and with, taking a warm shower and just drinking water, like these are all natural remedies that we have that we forget that we need something extra. Same if you, get a cut on yourself. We think that we need to do all these special things to help it heal. Same goes for even just like our health and wellness. Like we think we need to eat all these crazy things when, most of our diets, if we just eat properly, we're going to get all the multivitamins that we need and all the nutrients that we need for us to grow healthy. Even with kind of like our minds, right? Like through voice, through art, through, walking, even through movement, through all these amazing things, we can heal from the inside out. We can heal without having to buy stuff or to do stuff that's extra, what we're not able to do as is.
I always found, I live in New Hampshire. We got these tall pines, and there's a lot of great poets. There's a poet that said, nature is the cathedral,
Mhm.
right? So if I go walk in the pines along the Merrimack River, I feel revitalized just doing that. Don't have my Walkman on,
Yeah, yeah,
turn the cell phone off,
yeah,
and just listen to the river.
yeah,
Listening to the birds, listening to the woods
yeah.
itself. It's very restorative. In the summer, you can go barefoot and
Hmm.
actually touch the ground. And I'm part Cherokee, Blackfoot Indian, and there's a lot of oral histories and Indigenous peoples.
Yeah,
The connection to the earth,
yeah,
connection to spirit animals, and
yeah,
it's just like when you were willing to be open, that is very restorative. If
yeah,
instead of it being something that you want to tame,
yeah.
but you could actually believe that it has its own life force and being, and it's like to be respected and to be you know utilized for healing.
And to be bringing up two amazing things, that this is like such a great segue, is that being out in nature, looking at EMDR and how it was even created. Francine Shapiro was actually walking, going through a lot of her own, trauma in a way. And she was actually looking up at treetops, and she was looking from like one treetop to the other, going back and forth with her eyes. And she kind of noticed that, hey, wait a minute, like being out in nature, looking at these treetops is actually making me feel better. And with all this other research that she produced as a result of this one moment of nature and looking up at trees and moving her eyes, that created a healing theory, that created EMDR. And then, as you mentioned as well, with this idea of walking barefoot, so much research suggests when we actually walk barefoot, that's called grounding. That's a way to actually be mindful in the moment, and having your feet, whether it's on the grass or in the dirt, like that activates parts. Our feet have 200,000 nerve endings. Reflexology is a real thing where we press certain parts of our feet and it helps our body feel good. So when you're grounding, when you're walking barefoot in the forest, it's a great way for your body and your central nervous system to just reset and to just be calm and feel safe. And it's mind-boggling how that is, worth all the therapy, is walking barefoot and looking at the
Yeah,
trees.
it's so amazing when you're out there like hiking and you go find a forest pole and you take a dip. It's just
Yeah,
I find I cycle, I mountain bike in the woods. So you kind of get deep in the
yeah,
woods. You find these forest pools you can kind of bathe in and stuff after when it gets hot and stuff, and just communing with nature in that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you're on a hike or you're out snowshoeing or something, and you just, to me, it's like that is my biggest like way to decompress
Yeah. Yeah.
from doing the IT work. Because like sometimes we get in this corporate mindset,
Yeah.
and the benefit what they tell you is you got to stay in the cube, right?
Yeah.
You got to
Yeah.
put the 10 hours in with
Yeah.
overtime in. You got to
Yeah.
be plugged in, answer your boss. He calls you at like 11 at night and say, "Oh, jump on
Right.
this." It's like that does it doesn't seem like we're built for that.
No,
The
you're so in tune.
industry wants us to be built for that, but I don't think we're
Yeah.
really built for that.
Yeah. And going back to like you're so intuitive in the sense that like being out in nature, and then you're bringing up an excellent point around like cycling or just being out in fresh air. Breathing, we forget how valuable breathing is. Breathing is also something that could, bring us very much calm, and they can kind of help us navigate big emotions or big things that happen in life. And we take breath for granted. Being out in nature, taking those fresh, big, deep breaths, that's very therapeutic. That slows us down, and that lets us stay in this like thinking brain, right? We're able to process, have clear thoughts when we have nice fresh air. When you're
Mm,
stuck in the cubicle and you're kind of just like answering your phone, doing your tasks, like not paying attention to your breath, you're living in the cube. You're not living your life the best that it can be. And it really will boil down to just breathing, being out in the sun, being out in nature. And yes, I know that some people are like, well, it's I don't have that luxury. Maybe I don't live by a forest. You can just get outside and breathe, be in the sun. Like it doesn't need to
yeah.
be fancy. It doesn't need to be, a Bali trip or, some exotic forest. It can be outside. Just get outside and breathe and pay attention to your breath.
That was interesting because I lived in Japan, in Tokyo, for 2 years, and I
Wow.
used to go out, for lunch, and you see these little parks and people were doing tai chi.
Yeah, yeah.
And it was just in the middle of the day, people would go to these little forests. They have these parks all over Tokyo. Some of them are set up for like earthquake evacuation. They have like little temples in them and stuff that were more religious stuff, but they're just all over the place.
Yeah.
And when you go out, people were in there meditating, doing breathing, tai chi, and it's like, oh, it's like because you'd see a lot of these like salarymen, they would be in Tokyo like all day. They'd stay in these capsule hotels, but then they did that too.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
So they found a way to have some balance.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
being an Nichiren Daishonin Buddhist, I was like, "Oh, yeah, I see where they're getting the balance from."
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's genius. You look at cultures forever have been talking about like forest bathing, or just like as you're bringing up different things, like culture. If you look back on what we've been doing in the world, a lot of it's been immersing in nature, and it's been just slowing life down and finding that balance. It's remarkable when you actually think about, hey, there's actually a value in walking in a forest and hugging a tree. Like it's
Yeah.
mind-boggling how simple that is, and we think we need more, but that actually is what we need to slow it down.
Yeah,
Don't have
'cause,
time, you should make extra time for it.
so you have a book, Finding Wellness, and I would imagine it's a lot of the things we already talked about are in there. And you got it up on the screen. And, I like to ask are we're in the path of what's in your book, right? We've been talking about what's there, right?
100%. Yeah, definitely this idea of there's so many strategies. And when we talk about wellness and we talk about like feeling good, people often kind of default to, hey, I go for runs, and, I go to the gym or I do yoga, and we're very like physically driven with like this idea of wellness, thinking about wellness as like this bicycle wheel. And if we're only really pumping up one side of the bicycle wheel with the physical stuff, you forget the emotional, you forget the mental, and you forget the spiritual. And that bike is going to be really clunky as you move forward in life. And that's kind of like what we're seeing a lot is people are really focused on one thing, and they
Yeah.
forget that, hey, wait a minute, I need to be like, I'm actually emotionally invested in my wellness, and I need to be maybe even spiritual, like whatever that looks like. That might be, going to a place of service, or maybe just being outside in nature, right? So we just need to look at it from the bigger perspective of just one kind of self-care strategy.
Yeah, there's a lot of pillars, to a
Mhm.
human being. And,
Mhm.
sometimes people focus on, they're just like, I'm going to get my mental acuity. They're going to focus on logic. A lot of times I deal with a lot of guys who are mathematicians, and they're just focused on the logic exercise, brain exercises, but then they're not taking care of their body. They're
Yeah,
drinking coffee, tons of sugar,
yeah,
tons of
yeah,
caffeine, eating a lot of junk food.
yeah.
and said, well, I'm a real. You're focusing on one pillar and you're forgetting about your actual. You're not eating right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
then
you
you
might look
wonder,
great, but you feel horrible.
yeah, and then they just like they wonder why they're having all kinds of problems because like
Yeah.
we're eating all kinds of like chemical additives and not
Mhm.
the right balance into the food groups. You're not eating enough greens. You're not eating enough good
Yeah.
grains. You're not eating enough low fat protein. And
Yeah.
then you wonder, why do I feel lousy? It's like,
Yeah.
why
Yeah.
do I have no energy? Like,
Yeah.
why am I upset? Why am I
Yeah.
like, well, because there's a lot of pillars to a human being. And even if I talked to this guy one time who was a sports person, right? Like I don't know, a trainer. And he had the perfect kind of body, six pack abs. But when he looked in the looking glass,
Mhm.
he didn't see that.
Yeah.
And so he
Yeah.
realized that even though he physically had gotten to a good point, he hadn't worked on his like well-being in his head.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he realized that he had to focus on that and the food and other things, and not just take the food that was going to just help his abs. He's actually starving himself for other things, and just thought he was out of balance. And so
Yeah.
it's like it's a holistic point of view, right? to
Yeah.
to, to
Yeah.
get to
No,
the
you're
right.
you're touching on so many important points. And then as you're mentioning too, like as a society and going back to this idea of noise, we are a society that compares. We look at others, we kind of see, hey, they have that, I want that too. And we kind of like make this big mental exercise of just like taking stock of what we don't have. And that kind of, once you're saying too, leads to this idea of like, hey, we're not good enough, or hey, we need to do this to be better. We often compare how we look to other people, and we forget that, the world is based on like multicultural differences that are beautiful, right? And I think back to this like image that you see kind of an elephant, and you see a monkey, and you see a bird, and you see a fish, and then you have someone saying, hey, well, you're only going to be assessed on how you can climb up a tree. And you're looking at the elephant being like, it can't climb a tree. You're looking at the fish, you can't climb a tree. The tree is like irrelevant to like how amazing these animals are in their own right? But as a society, we compare, and we kind of like always want to be like someone else. And when we're looking in that looking at self, we don't see our value, we don't see our worth, because we're comparing our six pack to the next six pack, right? Where we forget, hey, what does the six pack actually do for us?
Yeah, I mean, unless you're gonna be doing something you require, like you're a Green Beret or a fireman, you
Right?
need to be able to lift stuff. You have to do it. It's your job. It's okay. Yeah, it makes sense that you want to be in
Yeah.
best condition if
Yeah.
that's your job. You're an
Yeah.
athlete, whatever.
Yeah.
But if you're somebody like if you're a ballerina or a dancer, like sometimes that your body type's not going to be same as an NFL football player.
Yeah. Yeah.
A
Exactly. Right.
cyclist, or like
Yeah.
if you're a mountain biker and you're a cyclist, you're climbing those hills.
Yeah.
You
Well,
have
and the
to have
other,
different body type for what you're trying to do compared to the
yeah.
weightlifter. It's not the
Yeah.
same body.
And 100%. And then you think about like what actually matters in life, and this idea of like connection and human beings and family. And then you're looking at, a six pack, maybe, a mom, like a mom would not have a six pack when she's having, carrying a child. And that's way more valuable, like to add life to the planet and
Yeah.
to find love and to make human beings than a six pack. And we kind of have this all backwards, where it's like, wait a minute, like let's honor what our bodies are for. And it's not to, wash our laundry on our bellies.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of times is that the comparison trap. I always end up working with the younger musicians, and they're comparing themselves,
Yeah.
and I'm saying, well, there's Taylor Swift's already out there,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I would be more interested in your demo that you're scared to show me because it's actually you.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not you
Yeah.
trying to channel someone else.
Yeah.
And I always tell them, it's like, think about Bob Dylan. Bob Dylan showed up and he did something that was like really amazing in the age of voice singers, like singers that have to have really high quality voice
Yeah.
according to what they felt like. They had Nat King Cole type of singer, Frank
Yeah.
Sinatra, people who were measured on their vocal capacity, to come in there and not have the range, and
Yeah.
to not have the typical voice that was radio ready
Yeah.
voice,
Yeah.
but to actually be a writer
Yeah.
and to
Yeah.
tell stories.
Yeah.
And it's like he was measured on his ability to write and tell a story and convey things that hadn't been conveyed in the form.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it changed the game because then
Yeah.
suddenly you could write and you didn't have to have the so-called radio voice.
Yeah.
You could
Yeah.
have a different voice
Yeah. Yeah.
and it still had value.
Yeah. Our gift is to bring who we are to the stage. It's not to act like Taylor Swift. It's not to be like someone else. It's actually to bring our authentic self, because being unique is actually the blessing. Hey, like if everyone looks the same, the world would be such a boring place. And this idea that we find beauty in like differences, we find, like the next amazing, thing that touches our ears is not the thing that we've already heard a million times. It's something new and different. And we forget that, hey, to stand out is actually to be different. And that's okay. We don't need to all be the same.
Yeah, I think the problem is like, accountants and actuaries, they like to have repetitive
Yeah.
processes they can measure. And
Yeah.
I understand what they like because that's their
Mhm.
discipline. But
Mhm.
that doesn't mean that like in the spreadsheet, the one thing it doesn't show is the value.
Yeah. Yeah.
It shows the
Yeah.
number, but it doesn't show the value. So you go in there and you say, "Well, I don't see the connection." It's like, well,
Yeah.
if you're just looking at monetary value, you don't see the connection points.
Yeah.
There's a lot of steps that before you see that dollar.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
just because you don't see it, you might cut it,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
you might not value it,
Yeah.
or you might say that's not important and not understand that's the foundational like structure that's needed to see the thing that's obvious.
Yeah. 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 We call
And
them
the obvious
outliers.
things that, yeah, it's like, if you're on the bell curve,
Yeah.
the outliers are kind of by where the interesting things are happening. The bell curve is
100%.
like it's the corporations are looking for everybody to be in the bell curve, but
Yeah.
saying they want the people on the outer edges.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
then they don't really want the people on the outer edges because they push us out.
Right. Right. Well, this idea that like anything like big in life that changes it is scary and different and new. And then we always like say, be the change you want to see in the world. And the change is not in the middle of the bell curve. The change is on the outliers, right? And so it's like bring yourself, be who you are, because that's way more valuable than being in the inside of that bell curve.
What I found is sometimes you have to take yourself out of that. Like in my career, I worked in the Fortune 500 and I got bored and
Mm-hmm.
I got tired of what I saw. And so I ended up going into like emerging and like startup type of smaller entrepreneurs that were more willing to let me wear multiple hats for whatever was necessary. So it
Yeah.
was more dynamic,
Yeah.
more
Yeah.
agile.
Yeah.
And I found I needed to be in that place. Other people like they hated that. They hate that because like they want something that's predictable.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
want something that's
Yeah.
comfortable. They
Yeah.
don't want to have to. That stresses them out
Yeah.
if they have to wear a lot of hats. They want to know they only have to wear one hat. So I mean, you kind of have to know who you are, right?
Yeah. Well, change is scary. People don't like change because it's not comfortable. It's unpredictable and it's scary. So when you have like the confidence or this idea of like not listening to the noise and just being who you are and being different, it's scary because half the people won't like you, half the people will. And it's not about what other people think of you that matters. It's about what you think about yourself. And so if you're being authentically you and you're like, you know what, I'm gonna show up and regardless of who you are, even if you're in the middle of the bell curve, half people won't like you, half people will. So it's kind of like you're not losing
Yes.
anything by being yourself.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's like I think safety. If you think
Mhm,
about human beings, it
mhm,
goes back to I always talk about the wolf at the door.
mm,
Like
mhm.
so if you were in the clan, you have a better shot against
Yeah,
that wolf at the door.
yeah.
And if you're by yourself in the woods, it's gonna get you. Like if you're with a bunch of people
Mhm, mhm.
in your group, in your tribe, you can
Yeah, yeah,
probably stand off against the saber tooth and the wolf. Now we got these virtual wolves at the door. You get
yeah,
triggered because somebody says something and brings something up, and it feels just like the wolf was at the door.
yeah,
And
yeah,
then you go for the safety of the conformity
yeah.
to so that you don't have to deal with the wolf at the door.
Yeah. Well, and you know what? The world and the society is built on fear a lot of the time, right? This idea of like fear is kind of what keeps us from being ourselves. And then if you look at like this acronym for fear, it's like false reality appearing real, right? This idea of like it's actually not anything real. Like we're just giving it this like wolf that doesn't exist. We're giving the wolf this power that hey, wait a minute, like why are we afraid of it? Why are we making our life choices based on this thing that hasn't even happened yet?
Yeah, because if people get pushed into the other has caused all the problems in my life,
Hmm.
right? Instead of like looking at, well, what did I do
Hmm.
in the last couple of years to put me where I am right now? It's
Hmm.
easier to say this other Joe Schmo over here
Hmm.
is the one that did it
Yeah, yeah,
because
yeah,
he likes red shirts or
yeah,
he likes
yeah,
black, and because he likes that,
yeah,
that wrecked my life.
yeah, yeah,
Really?
yeah,
If it worked, it's like everybody starts saying that.
yeah,
That's what I hear this influencer say.
yeah.
That's
Yeah.
easier to like, okay, yeah, let's put the guy blame on the guy with the red shirt.
Yeah. Yeah. We call that scapegoating, right? We forget to look at ourselves, where it's like, you know what? Looking at the circle of control, what we actually have control over is our thoughts, our actions, our behaviors. When it comes to us saying, well, it's someone else's fault that we didn't do something, we actually don't acknowledge our power and our control. There's no one out there who can make you do anything. You do it yourself. And that's kind of a really great message to think about, is that like whatever choices we make, we're choosing. And if they're choices that we want to feel good about, or that we want to kind of, have as our choices, then do those choices, right? Because you're the only one responsible for your behavior.
Is that the idea of positive psychology, or is that just part of it?
Positive psychology brings up the fact that we're all probably pretty good humans inside, right? Like we all have these amazing gifts and tools and strategies to navigate our life, that we don't need, kind of that external validation to be who we are. Positive psychology brings up, hey, we're all either good at math, or maybe we're good at science, or maybe we're good at people skills, or maybe we're good at animals, or maybe we're good at sports. Like we all have something that we're good at. And that's this idea of like positive psychology is to lean into what you're good at, and to lean in what you love. And if you're like, well, I'm not really good at anything, I don't love anything, then it's about exploring that, right? Because there's something out there that really does fill your bucket and make you love life. And it could be something that you haven't explored yet. And so maybe you like gardening, or maybe you like basketball, or maybe you like cross stitch, or maybe you like collaging, like whatever it is, finding something that actually makes you feel good. And that's kind of the gist to finding like a meaningful life, and to kind of find a little bit of who you are, and to feel good in this life, right? Because going back to this analogy of like, elephants and birds and fish and monkeys, like we're all different, and we all have our amazing own tools and life path that doesn't all look like climbing the tree.
Hmm. It seems like when we're children, like there's a point in time where like you're willing to learn how to ride that bike, and if you fall off and scrap your knee, it doesn't matter. You
Yeah.
learn to jump on a skateboard,
Yeah.
and when anybody thinks you want to learn how to do it, so if you're falling
Yeah.
down all day, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But there's a point where the childlike curiosity or willingness to do that seems to go away.
Yeah. Yeah. We get
And
too serious. We get too,
yeah,
like, we take ourselves way too seriously. Where it's like, wait a minute, like, have fun, like, be who you are.
and I wondered, like what I found with a lot of creative people, they still have that childlike curiosity. They didn't let it go.
Yeah.
They found a way to keep it.
Yeah.
And it's like, is it hard to, when you're dealing with people through therapy, to get people to recognize the permission structure to go back to that,
Yeah.
or to open up to that?
Yeah, there's a lot of different like theories that kind of look at whether it's like our life story about ourselves, or whether it's parts of us that we've kind of put away and we don't bring out because they were hurt at some earlier time in our life. So yeah, bringing it back to kind of who we are authentically does take a little bit of curiosity, and does take a little bit of like humility, or even this idea of like vulnerability, of exploring like, hey, wait a minute, I actually like skateboarding and I haven't done it, and I'm like 40 years old. It's like, what happened there, right? So it's going back to kind of who we authentically are, and it is about playing in that childhood, and playing in that like joy, right? We think that as adults we can't laugh and have joy. We need to always be serious, right? Careers are serious business. They can be fun. That's the whole point, is we're here one time. No one knows anything better than us about our own life, so lean into that.
Yeah, when you have like an environment, like if a lot of times I go to work and we have the whiteboard session, in an environment I'm in, everybody's throwing something on the board.
Yeah.
Everybody's
Yeah.
taking that post-it note and putting it on the board. I've been in other environments where there's only one or two people and there's 10 people in a room that do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the boss thought it was okay. Just like the teacher, when you're in a math class and there's only two kids there getting algebra,
Yeah.
right? Versus if you're in a class where the math teacher actually gets everybody getting it,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? So it's like the question is, all in the class where nobody gets it, is it the kid that's not understanding, or is it the teacher that doesn't know how to relay the information?
Yeah, and it probably is never that simple of either or, right? The child might be thinking of what they actually love, and it might not be related to math at all. Or this idea of, yeah, this child might be bored because it's too easy. Or the teacher might, yeah, have been speaking Latin and the class is in English, right? So there's so many factors that are involved. And yeah, we should celebrate our own unique differences. And when you're saying people putting stuff up on the board, people are scared to put their stuff up on the board because they don't think it's good enough. It is good enough.
Yeah, that's the thing. If you have when you have management or people who, and even in that in your partnerships or your life, if
Mhm.
you have a connection with somebody and they allow you to be you, like you actually can say stuff, and the reason you talk to them It's because you can kind of vent and they listen to you and they vent to you. And it's like, wow,
Yeah.
we're having a real conversation. It's not just one way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then you feel like, oh, wow, I'm being listened to.
Yeah. So connection is huge. Connection is what we strive as human beings. We want to feel connected to others, and we want to feel connected to our purpose, connected to, we celebrate success with others because we love and strive for connection. So you're right. This idea, when we have that meaningful connection with someone else, it's phenomenal.
And that's where oral, discussion to me, like the oral
Mhm.
histories,
Yeah. Yeah.
you think a lot of Native Americans, like it's those oral stories are, handed down generation after generation
Yeah.
that people really get to understand who they are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
They understand what their family is, what their culture is,
Yeah.
what their history is,
Yeah.
and then to have that conversation, then there's meaning in life if you know that story.
Yeah. So
And I
it's kind
think
of like you segued. Finding Your Purpose, a
oh,
guidebook to a more meaningful life. There's
wow.
kind of two. They go together. But I love that we're bringing this topic up because this is exactly kind of what needs to be talked about, hey? This idea of finding meaning, finding purpose, finding your wellness, finding your best version of you.
That's awesome. So you guys, you hit both sides with the 2 books.
You
So
hit both sides. You're fantastic at this. Thanks, Phantom.
well, just being a writer, like the one thing is when you're a writer, you get to be a better writer when you kind of go out Jack Kerouac and you explore the world.
Yeah.
And if since 2020 with the COVID, and like I explore the world by talking to as many people as I can.
Yeah, I love that.
And the human experience, is like a master class in humanity. Like every time you get somebody else's point of view,
Yeah.
and you're willing to actually listen to it,
Yeah. Yeah.
and not challenge it,
Yeah. Yeah.
and actually, listen and say like, well, maybe you agree, but don't disagree before you hear the whole
Yeah.
story,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Give the chance for the story to be heard.
Yeah.
Don't cut it off.
Well, if we could take this humility and learn from everyone that we meet something, like everyone has something to share with us and we could learn from. And then as you're kind of on this quest for knowledge, like the more you learn, you actually realize the less you know, the more that's out there to keep learning.
You learn what you don't know. And
Yeah.
I think that's the thing is like, if you've got the humility to realize what you don't know,
Yeah.
and that you're not the know-it-all, that you're not the one that's like, cutting people off because, well, I already know that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then it's like, you're gonna, to me, it's like, I don't stop like trying to, be involved in things until I'm not able to be involved.
Yeah.
Like something stop is like, and even then I'll try to find out what's the best way to still connect.
Yeah.
It's like you're always, you keep on playing like a jazz musician. We don't think that we can't play because we're 60 years old because it's a youth game. We keep
Yeah.
on playing because we love playing until we can't do it.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
It's like, so the idea that there's an expiration date on what you love based on your age or based on this or based on that, you gotta challenge that.
Yeah. Well, they always say you only get better with age, right? So it's kind of like anyone, like any artist is only going to get better with age. And especially with jazz, like you look at like the people who've been playing for longer, like they're the ones that you just really know come from a soul place, come from a place of being authentic, it's who they actually are.
Could you do it because you love it, not because you're trying to hit this? Like the problem I think a lot of times with people when they give up, they were trying to hit something and okay, they didn't really understand what they were in.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're a writer and you don't get the bestseller and then you stop writing, well, you're not a writer.
Yeah.
The writer's going to keep on writing.
Yeah. For sure.
But I want to thank you for being here because I know you said we had at the top of the hour we might want to have to do something, but you do have guidebookconsulting.ca.
Yeah.
Is that how people connect with you to get to your all
Yeah.
your
So that's I'm a private counselor, so therapist, EMDR certified, hypnotherapy, CBT, a lot of great modalities. And that's also kind of if you ever looking for a guest speaker, or if you ever want to connect for a podcast or a workshop. It's also how you can find links to the book. The book is actually, both books are available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble.
Awesome.
They're kind of everywhere if you look for them. But yeah, and would love to hear from anyone. So feel free to check out the website and send an email if you have any questions. I'd love to continue this discussion. I love meeting people. I love talking to people about anything. And this idea of, you're worth it. So please reach out.
I want to let everybody know that guidebookconsulting.ca, that link is fully clickable. on all the platforms that we're on. We've just been on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. So in the description of the podcast, that is a URL that you can click through. And those platforms are out there in the world right now. And we will be on all the other platforms where you can listen to or watch a podcast by later tomorrow. That includes like Apple and Spotify video podcast, iHeartRadio, Amazon, many, many more. We'll create a landing page so you can share that with your audience, and
Cool.
people are going to pick whatever platform they like. They don't have to, go to any one platform. But I want to thank you for being a guest on the Family Electric Ghost podcast this afternoon.
Andrew, thank you so much for having me. It's been an awesome pleasure to get to know you, get to talk to you, and hopefully, we'll talk again in the future.
Yeah, every time we have authors come on when they have new books all the time. So anytime you have a new release you want to talk about, new programs or services you want to talk about, let us know. And thank you very much for being on the show.
Have a great day. Happy Saturday.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.